Hey everybody, it's Achilles Justice here with the Philosophy Society. It is July 31st. It's a Wednesday. We're in the library at Toronto Metropolitan University. So today we're going to go through the second part of Put First Things First, starting in this version of the book on page 184. But first I'm going to respond to something that we talked about before we came upstairs. So you brought up this meaning of life question thing again, right? Like, if it's the case that you're going to die, what's the point at all? And you gave an analogy of like a sandcastle on a beach, that you can build the sandcastle and value the sandcastle, but fundamentally the sandcastle is going to be washed away by the tide, right? And my response was, one, it's what you're doing with your life that matters, that your life does have some contribution to society and the people you care about. And then two would be the quality of life, right? So you are alive and you can either suffer unnecessarily or you can limit the amount of suffering by being healthy. And then you can like have any suffering that is necessary be towards something meaningful, right? Because it's not about eliminating suffering entirely. That doesn't really make sense. And so I think that's the most important way to look at things. There is this instinct for self-preservation and to like not kill yourself, but that is part of like the realm of possibility. And we talked last time about Heidegger and Dasein and this possibility of death at all times, right? So I feel that part of living a good life is the attainment of well-being, which is the quality of your life fundamentally, right? And it's not like an easy thing where you just do one thing and then you necessarily have well-being as like a static standard element in your existence. It's an ongoing degree of maintenance and appraisal and integration of new things in your life, right? Things are going to change, our bodies are aging and changing. And so, that's part of like the transition from childhood to adulthood. And then there's this like, I don't know, stage of like, I don't know, I guess like, become like, as you become older, you're fundamentally just like learning to like appreciate things a little bit differently because you can't focus on your youth or your body as much, right? And so that's not a bad thing. That's just, it's part of the acceptance of what it means to be human. Like the sandcastle, aware of its sandcastle-ness, in some ways has to accept what it is. And it couldn't be anything else. And being human is weird because we're an animal with the degree of self-awareness that we are conscious of our mortality and we're conscious of being an animal, unless you impose some religious thing where you're distinct from animals and humans have this special quality. We do have a certain degree of special quality, but we are still animals. We're the most sophisticated animals that we really know. And the capacity that, our intelligence and our brains and that kind of stuff, the brain size relative to our body size and stuff, right? So there is a way to have meaning in life, and that's really what you want. You know what I mean? There's some things as a human being that almost necessarily will make you happy, and most people gravitate towards that, like having a family, And if that's not the case for you, then there's other ways to contribute to society and develop meaning in your life that is worthwhile, right? Because not everyone can go into that category. It just doesn't happen, right? And so I wrote a paper on the website called Meaning and Purpose. There's 3 properties that the psychologist that I did the research in that paper determined will create meaning in life. One was a purpose, which is a future-oriented goal. The second one was coherence, which is that all the narrative in your life kind of makes sense. Your goal and your identity kind of connect together. And the last thing is significance, that the goal you do choose is beyond yourself. It contributes to humanity as a whole. It's not something that's just your own hedonistic, selfish gain, like just the attainment of wealth, like monetary wealth, right? There's a limitation to that. And so there's a recent TED Talk that I can post in the chat by Martin Seligman. He was the founder of positive psychology, and they did an analysis on like happiness or eudaimonia, like living a good life and what that means. And they talked about the hedonic perspective, just like pleasure and avoiding pain. and they talked about like the meaningful life and then the eudaimonic life. And so we can take a look at that later and see what he says.
Because this question is brought because I review the chapter 2, because this is more related to chapter 2, like that, figuring out your life
Sure.
mission, and also and this is a definitely a very outstanding question that in philosophy you probably know the words by Camus, right? Camus. He said the first thing that philosophy or life should answer is why you don't kill yourself, in the morning, something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
So because this directly, talk about the target. You talk about contributing to the society, and then some people will say, why contribute to society? What's the point? I'm going to die anyway. And they can say, oh yeah, I agree. We don't like suffering, but the problem is when you don't have suffering, then you kind of say, then what's the point of fighting? Some people will say, oh, I just eat. If I only have like 10 years left, 5 years left, I just eat everything, and go to Japan and tour around the world, and then I will die. The only thing I can think of is just die peacefully. Maybe I go to Switzerland, to get an assisted suicide, whatever. What do you call that? Anesthesia?
Euthanasia.
Yeah, So it's like, what's the meaning? It's like what's the word for nihilism? Like that's no meaning. What's the
Nihilism?
Nihilism.
Sure.
Yeah, I need to talk about that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing. Why contribute to the society? Why is it just a trick? All this positive psychology talk about, is it a trick to brainwash ourselves so that we can be we can kind of thought that we have a purpose, but actually there's no purpose.
Just to get you to participate in the economy for those that own the most, as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's the purpose of positive psychology.
Mm-hmm.
I think positive psychology is trying to look at the empirical foundations of what makes us happy. They're focused on, for a long time, psychology was focused on what's going wrong psychologically. So they wanted to analyze empirically what's going right. And, there's you in the moment and your current experience and how that feels and how it connects to a larger picture, which is important for you, right? This is existential in some ways. I think that there's going to be some degree of planning to project into the future. How can I make sure that I'm comfortable and happy? Like, I need to know myself a little bit. Like, I've created an environment at my house where I have like a gym and I have like a backyard and stuff. And that makes me happy.
You have a gym?
Yeah, my own gym. Yeah. I didn't get to use it as much today as I wanted to, but it's there. And today was tricep day. We got 2 and we had to do stuff. And then, and so, like, you have to kind of know yourself. And that goes to one of the first principles of Western philosophy, at least, know thyself, right? And with that self-awareness, you can develop an environment that makes you happy based on, like, how you grew up when you were a kid, and those certain things will resonate with specific individuals more than others, right? And so, I think it's important. Like, I think that the nihilistic perspective was really a stage in this moral progression between like a Christian framework and then abandoning that, where Nietzsche says God is dead, and then looks at more of like an earthly human standard for morals and ethics. And there's a moment where it becomes nihilistic, right? And even in our own existential progress, nihilism is good when you're dispensing of like depressing thoughts and feelings. It's better to be nihilistic and have nothing than be in the negatives. And that's where I like had my moment of nihilism when I was like in my 20s, my early 20s or mid 20s, where I was depressed and I had suicidal thoughts and stuff. And then I just shifted towards this nihilistic perspective where I said, well, it's better to believe in nothing and have no meaning than if the meaning is self-destructive. That's not good. I'd rather be at 0 degrees than like negative emotional degrees, or to the point where you don't want to live anymore. Like, that's not helpful, right? And so I think nihilism has a utility there. Philosophers would get upset with me and they would say, that's not what Nietzsche meant, blah, 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 blah. But I'm being pragmatic. I'm saying, hey, we can take this concept and we can utilize it in a healthy way for the good life, right? I don't think nihilism as a means to an end. I wouldn't say nihilism is an end in itself, though. Like, where is that going to get you? You know, Hume said, like experience will teach you, right? Like, there's a certain degree where you can like not believe in anything and be skeptical, but then you're just going to starve and your instincts will take over and you're going to have to eat or drink something, right? And so it comes back to like the human condition. And there's like two fundamental axioms that I talked about. I don't know how long ago was it, in the fall time? There's videos on it. Fall time or the springtime. And before we started this book. And one of them is just consciousness and how consciousness is. And the second one is our sociability, that we became conscious within a social group. So fundamentally, like, it's not about participating in the economic wheel and being a modern slave. It's more about you finding meaning within humanity as itself, because you're human, right? It goes back to like the categorical imperative from Kant to some degree, that you don't exist in isolation. You exist because you come from the human beings, and you're going to find meaning, even if you are a psychopath. I think there is a way you don't feel people in the same way, right? Like they're dissociated to some degree and they just see people as objects. You still are a person, though, even in that context where you don't have the emotional connection, right, with other humans. Like, I've lived with some who I didn't diagnose them because I'm not qualified to do that, but they demonstrated traits of psychopathology and they called themselves psychopaths, because I have a house where I manage people and stuff like that, right? And they still wanted to be around other people, right? They didn't want to be alone. And they just didn't know how to relate to people that well. And they would take advantage of them and manipulate them and use them. And you're like, fuck you, kind of like, the hell, man, that's not cool. And then it would be hard for them to understand, right? But they still wanted that affiliation, that belonging, and that sense of community. And we could argue that's like a big place for a religion. Well, the door makes a big difference, eh? And that's where, I know. Should I use it? Okay, thanks. I just let it sweat. I'm like, whatever. And I would say that, maybe religion had a function for people 2,000 years ago or whatever, in the sense that they were much more brutal than whatever tenets were in the religious dogma, right? It's just that as a cognitive structure or a conceptual structure, it's very limiting because it has lots of consequences, like indoctrination that leads to a lot of unethical, heinous acts that no one really questions, right? And so I think there's room for a different community-based idea that can satisfy the needs that we have as human beings from an individual and a social context, and it can give guidance to those that don't have the same connection with human beings that a lot of us just take for granted because we just don't know any other way, right?
Yeah, talk about this. I remember Irvin Yalom.
Okay, yeah.
Irvin Yalom.
I have one of his books.
In one of his books, he talked about an example. That there's a lady who actually in a relationship with a guy, but she get along well with her partner, but she doesn't want to get married, because it feels like if she get married, then it seems that puts an end to something. Like, marriage means you are settled. But if you don't get married, it seems like life still have a lot of opportunities. Life is still still at the very beginning. But if you're settled with a marriage, then it feels like no possibility, nothing. So Yalam talk about this is related to the anxiety of death. It's deep down. It's like like when we are young, we feel like, oh, life is still yet to begin. There's so many opportunities, and there's some kind of a symptom that if you're always in that stage, you always think the life just yet to start,
Mhm.
So, but deep down is this afraid of death? Because death means no possibility.
Yes. For
So,
you.
yeah. So I guess how do you address this kind of anxiety? Like people don't want to settle down because settle down deep down means that's it. That's boring. That's it.
Yeah.
My life, I can see my life, 50 years, I will go to tomb, that's it,
Well, I think that there's different needs that certain people have
Mhm.
for commitment in relationships.
Mhm.
And there's kind of like different categories of things that are involved in an intimate relationship. Like sexual attraction is kind of like a thing. And then there's like personality compatibility, like can you be friends? And there's values and interests and like life trajectory. I wouldn't like it to be the case where we're compromising or giving up something of ourselves to be with somebody else. I think if you're doing that, there's something within you that needs work, because then you can have the capacity to develop resentment, right? I resent this person because they took away my freedom. Well, that's not good, right? I think it's more appropriate that this person is the opportunity, and that when you're with them, there's this vibrant sense of growth because they complement your existence. Like that other person being in your life, right? It brings something. They bring a different perspective or emotional level. They interact with you in a way that you grow as an individual. That's the best. And then other individuals, like psychologists could call them like attractive alternatives, they reduce in value, right? And then we could talk about monogamy if that is an appropriate approach, right? It has benefits and it has costs. And then there's like open relationships, which has benefits and costs. And so it depends on people's needs. Like there's different kinds of needs. And then evolutionarily, men and women have kind of, there's a standard deviation in what they generally want from partners, right? What they're going to be attracted to. Yeah, I think if you learn yourself first and you become your best self, that's really kind of what adolescence is supposed to be. Then when you're an adult, you can see what is out there for you, and then you can that's what dating is now. You spend time with these people and you see how complementary your personalities are, right? And then you choose to spend more time. And if you find that you end up getting into conflict, then you maybe shouldn't spend time with that person at that capacity, right? But if you're with somebody and it's good and you enjoy their company and other things work out well, like sexuality is important for a lot of people. If the sexuality part isn't there, then it's hard to say why you ought to be monogamous with that person, right? And yeah, and I think it has to be empirical at that point, But if you feel like it's that anxiety thing and you're giving up your life, I don't know, man. Is it an arranged marriage? Like, are you being forced into this? Because you don't have to. You could just be alone. You should be able to be totally fine being alone, But if you're coming into a relationship and you're like leaning against them, it's like, I need you in my life. Like, that's a lot of pressure on somebody. It's not fair to them. They have to deal with themselves. Why should they have to like support your existence? You need a psychotherapist to support your existence, to teach you how to do it for yourself, or call me or something like that, right? But yeah, I think that some philosophers were just like had psychological problems and they just philosophized those problems instead of dealing with the problems, like Schopenhauer. Like Schopenhauer, who was in love with this girl and then he never got her and he was just super depressed his whole life. It's like maybe you just needed to like get your shit together a bit, and then your brain would have like conceptualized other information instead of like trying to justify suffering in some ways. I don't know. Suffering exists, but life is not suffering. There's a whole spectrum of things that exists in life that you can experience as a person. You don't have to just only focus on suffering. That's a symptom of depression. We talked about that in the previous book in Feeling Good. It would be the mental filter, where people are pessimistic. They only look at negative things. Are you having the experience where you watch me online now and like sitting in person? Is that thing?
What do you mean?
Sometimes when people watch the video first and then they like sit here, it's like there's this like surreal moment where they're like, oh, I'm so. It's like you're like in a real person now,
It's very normal.
Okay.
Everything is very normal.
That's good.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
That's good. Yeah, that's a lot of wisdom there.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
What do you think, Alice?
About which
Any part.
part? I think in regards to the good life, David, what you were saying about a sandcastle, and like, what's the point of building a sandcastle if it's just going to return to sand? I think the point is that it was at once a sandcastle, or else it's just sand forever. Like, what's the point of being sand forever if you can be a sandcastle, even if for a blink in time? You're alive, you're here, like, you might as well do something. For all we know, this is the only life that we get. And if this is our only, like, or this is our one shot at being alive, and then it's just like nothingness for eternity, when you want to do something with it, and when you want to do something good with it.
It makes sense.
Sissy, what do you think?
I mean, in regards to Schopenhauer, I once read his writing to be able to stop, this cycle of desiring things and being satisfied but not fully, and then seeking again this thing and over. And I think we don't really know what's the meaning in life unless, I couldn't find the answer really of what is the meaning of life, really, even after reading Schopenhauer.
I don't think it's in a book, the meaning of
Yeah,
life.
it depends on
I don't think we'll
everyone's
find it in a book.
purposes. Depends.
Yeah, people will find like there's content and then there's like process. And so I think that the process is generally, when I talked about those three properties of goal, purpose, and significance, that is a mechanism that we can use as a means to the end for certain content. And some people might just find meaning in, like, again, like I said, having a family. Most human beings do that, or they participate in the economy, right? Or they're religious. But
What do you mean by the meaning of family? Is that like you marry with someone, you have kids? I mean, that's on the surface. But what does it really mean? What's the meaning of having a family?
that's a great question. I love that question. I think that the meaning of having a family is really, like, this is a good, this is beautiful. The purpose of parenting, right? Like, the first step is finding a partner that you feel that, like, you have to actually, like, conceive. That's like a thing, right? Because some people, they have sex and they can't have kids, right? So it could just be the fact that they were maybe incompatible, right? Then once you get that, like, that's a thing. There's also like your ability to function with each other, and your relationship is supposed to be representative of how well you would parent. So whenever I'm dating somebody, I'm thinking, how would this be if we had like a 2-year-old, And the 2-year-old is just like, whoa, that's wind? That's crazy. Or the 2-year-old stubs his toe and is like super upset. Like, that's what a 2-year-old's dealing with. Whoa, what was that? That's called wind. What are you talking about? Like, it feels new to them or whatever, like there's a whole bunch of experiences that we just habituate or become desensitized, that little person is just like, it's like a roller coaster. And so if you're having interpersonal conflict with somebody for adult things, like, what are we doing today? Like, there's some people that they just conflict and I don't know what to do. It's just our personalities just do not mix at all. There could be like extreme sexual attraction, but we cannot sit in the same room together, for like 3 minutes, And so if you see those signs, it's not a good idea to have a baby with them, because there's always going to be conflict. Like, you're bringing up a kid in a toxic environment. So that's not good. So I think the meaning is the screening element first, to see if we can get along in high stress situations. And then this property of love, like, you have to love the person. That's very useful. And we could talk about the definition of love. I'll just throw out Sartre's object transcendence there. I think that's really good. And that the meaning of the individual transcends their objective, like the object in front of you. It goes beyond that.
Transcend? What do you mean?
Object transcendence, going beyond.
Going beyond.
Yeah. The meaning of the person is not just them as a physical object. It goes beyond that.
That's love?
That's what Sartre says love is.
Thoughts?
Yeah.
That's what he deal with the portfolio?
It's like, I forget which chapter, but it's in the Being in Nothingness.
Oh, okay.
So if you have a healthy relationship with somebody, right, and then you have kids, the purpose is to just transpose all of your wisdom into that person as they grow. Really, right? Is be there for them, be supportive, be compassionate, empathetic, and being present is important. That's why having a healthy relationship with the partner is good, because you kind of want to be there. And that's why, like, if people get separated, you feel this sense of loss because you're not there as the child growing, and that sucks, right? The dissonance created in that, or that sense of grieving, is because you're taking away from the intended meaning of having a family, which would be raising the kids. Now, again, someone could raise their children to just be monsters, right? Like their values are out of whack, even if they're not being abusive necessarily. So I think that we have a responsibility to ourselves to be philosophical to some degree and understand things a little bit about the world. And then we can teach that to either our children, or you get like the next generation or whatever, right? I would say that's the meaning.
So
The first part.
the meaning has to be with the kids. What if the family that doesn't have kids, that kind of family still have meaning?
Yeah, for sure. And then, but like, so it would just be you with each other, and then you can take the love from the relationship and then transfer it to society, right? And in other ways, like you can like go to events and help people, and like, if you know people with kids, you can help them out. Like society is like, there's a whole range of human beings of different ages, and we have different needs. And depending on where you are, you have different things to offer. Usually as we age, our value of wisdom goes up, right? Not necessarily with experience. Like there might be wisdom of buying crack, like don't go down this street, talk to that guy. But that wisdom is not really the best. You know what I mean? I guess if you're in that area of life, then it would be good to know who to go to and who not to go to. But when I like, because it's not true that wisdom comes with age or just experience in general. Some experiences are kind of bad, right? The true wisdom would be like, don't smoke crack in the first place, right? Or whatever. And so, there's different ways that we can contribute to society, and you'll find meaning with that. And you got to kind of just check it out yourself, right? Just go back to the testing through experience again, see what it feels like to you, and then do it as most meaningful to you. Maybe it could be going to a different country, taking your, the wealth from what you've generated here, having some livelihood there, and then helping out people in that area, right?
Can you say just? I know I asked about a question, but can you say just one more time? Just explain. What's the meaning of contributing to the society? Why you care other people? Why?
That goes back to the Kant thing, is that you are human.
Mm-hmm.
And so doing something that's for the greater good of humanity is something that is meaningful. I guess that's, we could look at the research paper, but that's what they found. We'd have to like delve into that more. I'm not like necessarily prepared to go into the research on that, but.
So you're saying that just because that's part of our nature to care about people?
I think so. I think that there's an instinct for that, like evolutionarily, that's why we survived, is because we're pro-social and we learn to cooperate, like we are an aggressive species. That is part of our nature, but we cooperate a little bit more, So Robert Wright wrote this book called Non-Zero, where he said that societies and groups, people that engage in win-win interactions have more interactions in the future, right? So they can grow and expand at a higher rate than those that have zero-sum relations. This is basic thesis.
So what do you say to those people that, the consumerism, I don't care. I'm not violating law. I'm not hurting anyone, but I just have fun, on my life,
Yeah.
I just touring. I just eat good stuff. I just go to Caribbean, whatever, What do you talk? But I don't need. I don't feel the need to care about other people. I just take care of myself. Why? It's not a requirement by law, right? If I don't care, I don't donate to charity. I'm not violating the law. What do you say to those people?
Well, you like an economist would say you're participating in the economy, so that's a good thing. If you're not hurting other people and being unethical, that's a good thing, right?
But I don't vote. I don't care. I don't care what they teach at the school.
It's socially apathetic but self-interested.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something lacking in that person's life. They're like, I think if we explored a little bit, there's some meaninglessness in there that they don't feel good about. And these other things are a way to ignore or avoid that true meaninglessness. I'd like to unpack that person, you know, and really talk to them and see what the purpose of life really is. Because we go back to that previous sandcastle example, if it's just going to wash away anyways, then what is the purpose? You know, and it could be a cognitive capacity thing. They might not have the cognitive apparatus to understand that they are significant in the world and they can make the world a better place. They just might lack that ability to comprehend that. And so they're just like, what are you talking about? I'm just going to drink and do coke. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, they might not care, right? And yeah, like that comes down to a socialization solution. And that's where religion has kind of functioned that way, you know, that they have certain tenets and people are pushed in a specific direction to like give to charity and do certain things. And that's good. Like we can say that that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the indoctrination and the dogma and that stuff's a problem. So there's room for, you know, people that lack cognitive capacity. The properties of like conforming are good in that sense because they can conform to good values that they wouldn't necessarily be able to see on their own, right? So that's okay, you know. But then when we have things like the Holocaust or, you know, in Iran, people conforming to the morality police, that's not a good thing, right? Or other, like Jaji's brought up, other immoral acts that occur in the world, right? Conforming to those things is bad, right? But conformity as a social phenomena or force is not necessarily bad. You know, it just depends on what the end would be, how it's being used, you know, and it's not even something that could be intentional. It's just like the bystander effect happens on its own. Okay, let's take the horse and let's go to the next town here.
I'm asking too many questions.
No, it's fine. Okay, should I just start a new video and go with the 7 habits? How long are we talking about this stuff for? Yeah, let's start a new video. Okay, guys, you got to rejoin. Okay, I'm going to do a new video.